Tonight we are slipping quietly into a world that never lost its library. The wind is soft, brushing against the shutters, and somewhere in the stillness, a candle flickers beside a pot of steeping tea. It's late, so late the world forgets to move quickly, and time itself begins to exhale. The floor is cool beneath you. Outside, a single cart rumbles past on old wheels. Inside, it is just you, and a question older than most cities. What if the Library of Alexandria never burned? You may never know the end of this story, but that's all right. Let the unanswered linger. Let your mind drift with the scrolls. If you like this space and want to see me again on future nights, please like and follow. We have many more nights to tell stories together. Let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is. Each of us is falling asleep from a different corner of the world. Take a deep breath, release whatever today has placed on your shoulders, and now let's go walking. You wake beneath limestone arches, still cool with morning dew. Pigeons roost on the ledges. A cat yawns from the shadow of a column, and beyond the marble steps lies the Great Library of Alexandria, intact. Whole, undisturbed, the smoke never came, the Roman fires were doused, the papyrus scrolls were never fed to war or neglect. It survived. You press a palm against the sun-warmed wall and feel knowledge humming beneath your skin. Inside are over 500,000 scrolls, some crumbling at the edges. But all alive, you don't need a pass. The library, impossibly, remembers you. The door opens with the quiet sound of wood sighing against stone. You step into a hall lit by filtered light, no torches. Only the sun bouncing gently off polished stone. Voices murmur. The language, Greek, mostly, but there's Aramaic and Sanskrit. You catch a whisper in Nubian, a cough in Latin, a yawn in Old Egyptian. You walk slowly. No one rushes here. The scrolls are in no hurry. They've waited 2,000 years. They'll wait another 2 minutes. A steward approaches. He's older, and his linen robes are creased like they've been slept in since the Ptolemaic dynasty. He hands you a wax disc, stamped with the symbol of a quill over an open eye. No words, just that. You're permitted. You smile. He doesn't. He's been here longer than the sun. Your footsteps echo down a hallway lined with shelves carved into the wall itself. Scrolls stacked 3 rows high. Ropes loop down from the ceiling to reach them. A girl no older than 10 pulls one down like it's nothing. She cradles it like a cat. A soft breeze moves through the open atrium above you, lifting the edges of papyrus like fluttering leaves. You pause by a table where 2 men are arguing in hushed tones about whether the tides are caused by the moon or by the mood of Poseidon. You want to join in. You don't. You keep moving, because today you are not here to research or debate or write. Today, you're here to witness. You step into the Hall of Memory, a circular room filled with pillars and echo. In the center, a basin of still water reflects the stained glass from above. The glass shows no saints, no angels, just stars, galaxies, sea monsters, a map of a world drawn from dreams. And beneath the glass, scrolls, sealed in glass jars, labeled not in names, but in riddles. The bone that spoke, wounds that did not bleed, the sun when it hid behind the moon. You kneel beside one, the title etched faintly, the invention of fire twice over. Your breath catches. This scroll, This one is about the discovery of combustion, not in the 1800s, but 2,000 years too soon. A scientist, possibly a woman, her name half erased, recorded experiments with sealed flame in air, which sounds suspiciously like a primitive combustion chamber. The rest is diagrammed in red ink, curled into spirals and arrows. You lean closer. The ink is scented with oil of lavender. Whoever wrote this wanted it to last, and now it has. You leave that chamber and wander upstairs, where frescoes climb the walls, scenes of scholars arguing beside rivers, of astronomers mapping stars with a rod and strain, of traders exchanging scrolls for silk, salt, and secrets. One painting shows an Ethiopian sage handing a scroll to a man in Buddhist robes. Behind them, a camel, a phoenix, a dome with open windows beneath a crescent moon. A bell rings somewhere deep in the library. Not loud, just enough to let the room shift. A signal that the light is changing, that the time for reading has passed into time for remembering. You sit on a worn bench carved with lotus petals and stare out into the library's quiet sprawl. You imagine if the world had never lost this, if the scrolls on medicine, astronomy, philosophy, poetry, hydraulics, democracy, mathematics, surgery, and theater had never vanished into fire, if they had been copied, spread, argued over, mistranslated, and rediscovered again and again for 2,000 years without interruption, if no dark age ever pressed pause on progress, if human minds were allowed to connect from east to west, Alexandria to Loyan, Carthage to Kanchipuram, Babylon to Kyoto, without waiting for paper to be reinvented, maybe we would have cured diseases centuries sooner. Maybe we'd walk among the stars by now. Or maybe we'd simply be kinder, more aware that the past wasn't quiet, it was brilliant. A steward passes behind you. He doesn't look at you, but he says, "Careful, the scrolls remember who reads them." You nod, you rise. Outside, the sun has slipped lower, and the wind is cooler, but the great library still stands behind you, silent, waiting. Tonight, it didn't burn. You descend the steps of the library and feel the wind press lightly against your robes. A quiet thrill lingers in your chest, like you've just touched something forbidden, something impossibly alive. In this world, the library never burned, and now, centuries of wisdom ripple out from its walls like soft tides across time. You walk the wide streets of Alexandria, and even the city feels different. Cleaner, yes, but not just in stone and scent. There's a sharpness in how people speak, how they pause in thought before answering, how children debate the color of sound while chasing cats through sunlit courtyards. You pass a baker arguing with a musician about the ethics of dissonance. A merchant offers papyrus printed with geometric riddles. You smile. This is a world that never forgot, because knowledge wasn't lost in a fire. It grew. It stretched fingers across continents, kissed borders away, and raised the floor of human understanding one scroll at a time. You duck into a quiet tea house beneath flowering vines. The air is thick with the smell of cardamom and memory. A boy no older than 10 is explaining planetary orbits to his grandmother using a diagram etched on the table in honey. She corrects him gently, and he listens. You sip mint tea and glance at a wall covered in scroll fragments laminated behind thin glass. They're not decorative, they're honored. You focus on one. It shows the development of surgical stitching from ancient India. Another shows fluid dynamics explored by Phoenician shipbuilders. Yet another details the nutritional value of seaweed recorded by a Chinese scholar who visited Alexandria during the reign of Cleopatra's father. Each scroll was copied 100 times, stored in twin libraries from Thebes to Samarkand, never erased, never shelved and forgotten. Humanity never pressed reset. You close your eyes and ask, what else would we know today if nothing had been burned? A man sitting near the door leans over, as if he heard your thoughts. We would know the original sound of lost languages. He says, how people dreamed before steel was invented, and how the first poets describe thunder. He sips his tea and adds, we might even know who we are. You step back into the street. The air has grown cooler, and the sky is beginning to warm itself into the blue-orange folds of dusk. A nearby square is lit with tiny lanterns, their light dancing across the cobbles like thoughts trying to become memory. In the center stands a statue, not of a general, or a god, or a king, but of a librarian, her arms open wide, scrolls tucked in each hand. At her feet, the inscription reads, the world changed because we remembered. You press your fingers against the worn stone, and it feels like touching a heartbeat. Later, you drift into a communal reading hall. There are no chairs, just cushions scattered like soft punctuation. People from all nations sit barefoot, curled into the words of civilizations. A man from Carthage reads aloud from a scroll about coral reefs. A woman from the Indus Valley recites a poem so old it doesn't translate. Children giggle at the wrong parts. No one corrects them. In this world, education isn't a ladder, it's a garden. You don't climb to escape others. You grow in all directions together. One root supports another. You recall something the steward said earlier. The scrolls remember who reads them. You're starting to understand. It's not a warning. It's a promise. Because here, in this world, even if you forget something, the library remembers it for you. Your childhood questions, your lost languages, your ancestors' myths, they're all cataloged, whispered back when you're ready. No fire ever dared silence them. As the night deepens, you return to the steps of the library, not to enter but to sit, to watch, to wonder. The stars above Alexandria are clearer tonight. You see Orion stretch behind a veil of violet haze. Below, the sea hums softly against the shore. The city exhales, and you're starting to believe this world could have been real, that it still might be, if enough of us remember. You stretch your legs beneath the marble steps, arms folded loosely as the night air folds around you like a silk shawl. Alexandria does not sleep. It hums gently, perpetually, like the steady turning of a scroll beneath thoughtful fingers. You can almost hear the crackle of ink drying, the shuffling of sandals against stone, the whispered poetry passed between pages and people. In this world, the library's fire never came, and so its light never left. You decide to explore the archive of untranslated scripts. It's not a place of prestige, but of humility, tucked beneath the east wing, down a slope marked only by a small oil lamp and a carving of an open ear. The floors creak, the smell, a quiet blend of beeswax, dust, and dried plum ink. A quiet attendant with a limp and a gold earring nods at you. No questions, just a key carved from cedar wood. handed to you like a quiet challenge. You take it. The door opens with a heavy sigh. Inside, scrolls upon scrolls, not arranged by subject or author, but by emotion. One shelf glows faintly, scripts written in moments of joy. Another smells of salt, scrolls inked for grief. And in the far corner, the shelf of confusion, scribbles, ideas half-formed, languages still unknown. You pick up a scroll so old, the fibers whisper, the text flows in two directions, one from right to left, one from left to right. The content, a dream retelling of a flood that may have been real, or may have been allegory for forgetting. The scroll closes itself when you blink. Historians still debate whether these texts were the work of madmen or visionaries too early for their time. You replace the scroll and look up. On the far wall, a mural gleams with faint traces of crushed lapis. It depicts what could only be described as a printing device, not Roman, not Chinese, something hybrid. A scholar hands a scroll to a child, and behind them a loom-like structure spits out more. It's a speculative diagram, but the fact it was imagined at all here, so early, means the thought existed. If the library had lasted, perhaps the printing press wouldn't have waited for Gutenberg. Perhaps ideas would have traveled the Silk Road on paper already multiplied. You step outside, scroll ink still fresh in your mind, and then, something strange. You notice the moonlight glinting off the waters of the great harbor, and suddenly you realize the lighthouse of Alexandria is still standing, still burning with its three-tiered flame, still guiding ships from every continent to this bastion of thought. It was never brought down by earthquake, never dismantled. Its flame, symbolic and literal, remains. You walk the causeway to it, passing night fishermen with nets like lace and women selling candied almonds wrapped in thin blue paper. Everyone greets you with nods, with language soft and rhythmic, as if everything here, every syllable, knows its place in a long and living story. Inside the lighthouse base, scrolls are stored too, but not just maps of trade routes, astronomical charts, tidal predictions, even early observations of Saturn's rings sketched from the upper tower. One such scroll depicts the moon's shadow crossing the earth, with a caption translated roughly as, "The sky blinks slowly." You sit on a warm stone near the lighthouse edge and look at the stars. In our world, you remember how long it took to rediscover what the Library of Alexandria had already begun. Copernicus, Newton, Galileo, all standing on the shoulders of what had already once been known, then lost, then reimagined. Here, they didn't stand alone. Here, knowledge is a torch passed in calm hands, not stolen in conquest. You wonder, what would medicine look like if we hadn't forgotten surgical tools from India or antiseptic herbs from Nubia? What if we'd never doubted that the heart pumps blood, an idea suggested here centuries before Vesalius proved it? What if every child, like the boy in the tea house, grew up hearing scrolls sung like lullabies? You close your eyes. In this world, sleep is not an escape, it's a continuation. Tomorrow, there will be more to read, more to remember. But for tonight, beneath the glow of the lighthouse that never fell, you finally rest. When you wake, if it can be called that, given you never quite fell asleep, you're still on the warm stone ledge beside the lighthouse. The sea laps gently below, and the city stretches out behind you, sun-washed and already murmuring with morning. But But something's different today. You notice it in the air, the current not of weather, but of possibility. You rise slowly, brushing sleep dust from your robe, and begin walking back toward the city proper. Alexandria is fully alive now, and not just the Alexandria of scrolls and study, but of invention. You follow a group of engineers, yes, engineers, down a broad avenue lined with bronze water clocks. They're heading to the Innovation Agora, a part of the city you hadn't seen yet. There are no statues here, no shrines or dedications, just tools, diagrams, models, and minds, hundreds of minds. One boy is showing a prototype of a wind-powered grain sifter. Another woman explains the magnetic properties of a volcanic rock she's suspended above a copper ring. Their work is quiet, careful, collaborative. No one shouts, no one hoards ideas. You realize, in this world, innovation isn't fame-seeking, it's survival-enhancing. Progress isn't about being first, it's about being useful. You stop beside a man turning a crank. The machine it powers spins a wheel etched with symbols from both Egyptian and Indian astronomy. The man looks up at you and says, "It calculates eclipses, centuries ahead." You laugh, he doesn't, and suddenly, you remember how far behind your own world actually is. In this world, ancient Alexandrians never lost their head start. They had already been working on steam propulsion, automata, optics beyond reflection. In our world, it took nearly 2.000 years to reclimb that hill. You reach out and touch a gear from the device. It's warm. You wonder who imagined it first, and who got to see it actually work. From the Innovation Agora, you walk toward the city's edge where you find the House of Questions. That's its real name, a place not for answers, but for problems. The exterior is unadorned, almost monastic. Inside, rooms branch off like roots, and in each, a problem no one solved. One room is filled with walls of language, pictographs, alphabets, symbols, gestures, all different systems of communication recorded from lost tribes and ancient trade routes. A soft-voiced scholar explains, "We're trying to find the universal syntax beneath them all. The language not of words, but of meaning." Another room hums with the rhythm of dripping water. A marble map covers the floor, and tiny droplets land on specific regions. It's a simulation, weather prediction, based on tide shifts recorded in scrolls thousands of years old. The library collected storm stories. A young girl says, "We're just listening to them now." You move from chamber to chamber, each one more improbable and beautiful than the last. This place, this world, is not driven by capitalism or conquest. Its fuel is curiosity. Its structure is generosity. You don't publish to be cited. You publish so no one forgets. As you sit beneath a stained glass oculus in the final hall, something occurs to you. In our world, we often say knowledge is power. But here, knowledge is connection, a bridge between what was, what is, and what could be, a conversation that never had to be restarted. And suddenly, you feel the tiniest tug in your chest, a homesickness, but not for home, for this, for the world that never lost itself. You remember something from the first scroll you read about the rivers that fought each other. Maybe it wasn't just a metaphor. Maybe it was a warning that if we forget too much, our knowledge dries up, that when libraries burn, it's not just paper we lose, it's memory, And without memory, there is no self. You walk back through the city slowly, past sculptors debating the physics of shadow, past a group of dancers practicing rhythms based on planetary rotations, past a vendor who hands you a piece of spiced bread without charge for the journey. She says, you ask, what journey? She just smiles, and so you keep walking, bread warm in your hand, and the library's spires glowing once again in the evening light behind you. The sky turns pink, then violet, then dark, and even then, Alexandria does not sleep, neither do you, not because you're restless, but because here, every night is another chapter. You return to the steps of the library just as twilight leans against the city, casting a dusky veil across the tiled roofs and softening the salt-brushed wind that slides off the harbor. The spires and columns are now golden silhouettes, their edges glowing like the rim of a polished goblet. For a moment, the world stills. Then, with a breath and a creak, the doors of the main hall part again, not for you this time, but for the crowd arriving. You didn't know there'd be a gathering. No announcements, no trumpet sound, just the steady arrival of people carrying scrolls and clay tablets, slates of wax, bundles of reed pens. They come barefoot and sandaled, cloaked and belted, some with sleeves ink smudged, others in spotless linen. You watch them enter with the hush of reverence, as if they're not just attending a lecture, but witnessing a resurrection. Someone nudges your arm, a girl no older than 10, holding a bundle of dried herbs and a tiny carved wooden frog. You should come, she says. They're about to start. You blink, and before you can ask what's starting, she's skipped off into the growing crowd. You follow, because of course you do. The lecture chamber is vast, yet intimate, no raised podium, no stone dais, just a low circle of cushions and a domed ceiling painted with constellations so precise. You find yourself unconsciously aligning them with the stars you saw last night. In the center stands a woman with skin like bronze warmed by firelight, her hair tied with a strand of lapis beads. She's old, not fragile, but burnished, like a scroll kept safe for decades and finally reopened. She doesn't begin with a name or a greeting. She simply says, if we had not burned, what would we be? And with that, the room listens. She speaks of a theory long lost to your world, a method of mapping memory through scent. The Alexandrians, she explains, believed every memory had an aromatic counterpart. Joy carried a note of fig blossom. Regret smelled faintly of myrrh and wet stone. And so they stored memories with perfumes, not to remember, but to feel. She opens a small vial and waves it gently. The scent is honeyed and sharp, like citrus left in sunlight. A hush ripples through the room. Now, she says, what do you remember? You don't answer aloud, but something surfaces. The way your mother's robes rustled when she knelt. The sound of your name pronounced with certainty. A bowl of stew beside a window in late summer. It's as if the past had just been waiting for the right smell to step forward. The woman continues, if we hadn't burned, she says softly, our medicine might taste different. Not more advanced, just more kind. She describes how the library once hosted healers from Thrace to Sri Lanka, each bringing not just remedies, but stories. Here, ailments were not listed but narrated. They didn't treat symptoms, they translated suffering. One scroll, she says, told of a man cured of melancholy not through herbs, but by reciting poems to the sea. Another instructed midwives to sing in a minor key during birth to study the baby's heartbeat. Historians, she smiles, still debate whether that was science or song. You wonder how many cures were lost, not because they failed, but because they weren't recorded in a way conquerors understood. What if the greatest medicine was storytelling? The woman pauses. She walks slowly around the circle, her voice now lower, drawing you in, and if we hadn't burned, she says, we might understand time differently. This gets the room's attention. She lifts a slate etched with concentric spirals. Here, she explains, is a calendar not of dates, but of returns. The Alexandrians once believed that time wasn't linear, but layered, that events reoccur in patterns, not repeating, but echoing, like waves, each one larger or smaller than the last. She traces her finger along the spiral. This scroll, she says, predicted the rise of oceans, the return of solar flares, the swing of empire and collapse, not with precision, but with rhythm. Her eyes meet yours. If we had kept it, maybe we wouldn't have been surprised by the things we call history repeating. You shiver, not from cold, from recognition. She smiles, then gestures toward a small group rising behind her. They step forward, not to perform, but to remember. Each one carries a fragment, a piece of metalwork, a feathered quill, a diagram of sound waves sketched in red ink. One by one, they place their pieces in the center of the circle. You realize what you're witnessing, a reconstruction, not of an artifact, of a method. They're recreating a lost device, an ancient audio recorder, of sorts, designed to preserve not just sound, but inflection, silence, tone, a machine not for capturing noise, but emotion. In your world, you recall how long it took to reach even the phonograph, and here, they were already listening for the soul behind the voice. You sit frozen, watching them work in silence, no rush, no applause, just quiet, careful reverence. One man adjusts a series of threads tied between carved reeds. Another attaches a tiny lens made of ground crystal. The woman who first spoke to the room steps forward, presses her finger to a symbol, and the machine hums softly. Not like technology, like breath. Someone begins to speak. You don't understand the words, but the cadence is familiar. The pain behind the syllables, the grace in the pauses. And you understand, finally, why the library could never truly burn. Because even if the fire had taken the scrolls, the memory of how to listen remained. The session ends not with a dismissal, but a question. What would you carry forward? If you were the last one left, you don't answer aloud, but you look around at the candlelit eyes, the lifted chins, the softened breath, and you know, this was always the point. Not to hoard knowledge, but to hand it down, gently, intact, alive. The room empties slowly, and you remain behind, tracing your finger along the spiral calendar etched into the stone floor. One loop touches another. You wonder, what if this moment had already happened before? What if someone else, 1,000 years ago, sat where you are now, imagining a future that still remembered this place? And what if that someone was you? Time folds softly around the question, and somewhere nearby, a scroll begins to open, unwritten, unburned, waiting. The next morning, the city stretches awake in a hush, as if Alexandria itself is reluctant to rise. You feel it too, the resistance in your limbs, the afterglow of the night before. The memory of that spiral calendar still coils somewhere beneath your ribs. Unspooling itself slowly, you leave your sleeping mat behind, toes touching cool stone, and shuffle toward the southern portico. Not because you know where you're going, because the air smells like cardamom and wet ink, and somehow that feels like an invitation. A pigeon flies overhead, you swear it winks. By the time you reach the eastern wing of the library, the wind has begun to shift, a sea breeze, tangled with the scent of fermenting grapes and something metallic. A storm, maybe, or the smell of old drawings from the cartographer's hall. You step inside, and the noise falls away like a curtain. This part of the library doesn't hum like the others. It breathes slow, measured, methodical, a giant chamber of silence carved for the keeping of maps. But not just maps of oceans and continents. These are maps of breath, of dreams, of sky. A steward greets you with a nod, eyes half-lidded, as if sleep is a cousin he'd rather be visiting. He gestures toward the curved tables ahead, each covered in parchment so wide it drapes off the sides. You choose one with a map that looks less like geography and more like music, a swirl of lines and shapes. Moons dancing around words you can't read. You lean in. It's a star chart, but not as you know it. This one isn't trying to locate constellations. It's trying to describe their moods. Above Orion, someone has painted a small symbol shaped like a broken harp. Next to Cassiopeia, a black dot like an eye closed in mourning. You whisper, what were they trying to feel? Someone next to you replies, whatever we weren't taught to notice. You turn. The voice belongs to a woman in a long ochre robe, her wrists stacked with thin copper rings. She introduces herself not with a name, but with a gesture, fingers spread, palm up, a sign, you gather, for one who reads the sky. She unrolls another map and shows you something astonishing, a lunar chart from India, annotated by a priest from Thebes, then copied by a Phoenician sailor. This, she says, was once kept in a cedar chest sealed with turtle wax and buried beneath the chamber of winds. You blink, you made that up. She grins, of course, but someone didn't, and then she adds, this is what we lost. She tells you of the correspondence system the library once maintained, letters flown between Alexandria, Babylon, Carthage, even China, not by bird, by memory. Each region had a reciter, a person trained to memorize entire scrolls. They'd travel, recite, transcribe by ear. It was slow, but it kept stories alive. And the stories were odd. One letter described a people who believed children were born with their previous lives still whispering in their bones. Another mentioned a machine in a temple that could sing the weather. Yet another included a recipe for bread that only rose during lunar eclipses. Historians still debate, she laughs, if that recipe was real or a joke. But her eyes shimmer with something else. Loss, maybe, or longing. You wander deeper into the hall and discover a sculpture near the rear alcove. At first, it looks like a collection of marbles stacked by a distracted child. But then you see the pattern, one orb for each recorded solar eclipse. One smaller stone between them, unmarked. That's for the ones we missed, says a voice behind you. The ones that passed without notice, or the ones yet to come. You sit, right there on the stone floor, because suddenly, you feel the weight of all the knowledge you didn't know existed. Not just books burned, but thoughts never followed, questions unasked, like, what if they'd found a way to store sound in clay? What if a theory of gravity had been written in hieroglyphs and then ignored for being unscientific? What if someone had already understood how blood carries memory? You breathe, slowly. The woman from before reappears with a small box. Inside are 6 tiny stones, each carved with a different animal. This was once a game, she says. Players would roll the stones and tell a story based on the creatures that landed face up. You pick 2 at random, a fish and a bird. She smiles. Go on, you say. They fell in love, she says, and then they couldn't agree on where to live. She nods. Now you understand. That's how mythology begins. You realize in that moment that the library wasn't just a storehouse of fact. It was a playground for possibility. They recorded dreams as seriously as they recorded battles. They debated over metaphors the way your world debates over physics. One scroll in the corner, aged and half-eaten by mildew, reads like a treatise on shadows. Not light, not shape, shadows, their meaning, their secrets. One line reads, the shape behind a thing reveals more than the thing itself. You sit with that for a long time, and then you hear it. A bell, not loud, not clear, but persistent. You follow it, not because you know where it leads, but because you want to. The sound carries you down a staircase so tight you have to turn sideways. Down and down and down until the air cools and thickens. A crypt, a cellar, no, a chamber, round, stone-walled, with no scrolls, no maps, only voices, projecting from small holes in the wall. Echoes, recordings, spirits. You can't tell. They speak in dozens of languages, all at once, but not in chaos, in harmony. Somehow, they don't overlap, they interlace. You hear Greek woven into Sanskrit, Hebrew sliding into Old Egyptian. The voices don't shout, they whisper, they console. You don't catch every word, but the meaning is clear. Remember us. And you realize, these aren't archives. They're ghosts, not haunting, holding. This room was a memorial. To thoughts unfinished, you lean against the wall. Let it all in, let it echo. Eventually, the voices fade, the bell stops, silence returns, and you walk back up, carrying something you can't name. Not knowledge, not belief, but a sensation, like being held by time itself. As you emerge from the depths, a beam of sunlight catches your face. It feels like approval, and you whisper, not sure why, I won't forget, because even if the library burned, it didn't vanish, it just changed addresses, and one of them is you. You leave the subterranean echo chamber with a slower step, as if the library has inserted something heavy into your bones, some weight of ancient breath. Not quite sorrow, not quite clarity. The stairs behind you tighten like a throat, swallowing the voices you can no longer hear but somehow still carry. You step into light and find a change, or maybe it's you. The morning haze has lifted, and the hallways now feel stretched by something electric, as though the scrolls themselves are restless, waiting for new hands, new eyes, new interpretations. You turn left, not because you know what lies there, but because you don't. A corridor lined with brass plates leads you to a chamber of tools, implements of learning. not writing. This, you realize, is where experiment once bloomed alongside theory. Brass astrolabes hang like ornaments from the ceiling, gently swaying with the weight of the breeze or breath or memory. A glass prism, cracked but intact, catches the light in the center of the room, bending it like soft arms into colors that have no names. Beneath it, a table scattered with devices, curved mirrors, weights made of lead and beeswax, tubes for examining stars, and a wooden model of something that looks suspiciously like a human lung. You touch it, the lung expands slightly, wheezes. It's not air you hear. It's an old voice, wheezing out. Sympathy between breath and thought is measurable. You pull your hand back like it's fire. To your right, an older man in a robe dyed with wine residue gestures at a glass bowl filled with sand. "What to try time?" he asks. You think he's joking. You're wrong. He holds up a feather, ostrich, maybe, and drops it in. It lands, and the sand beneath shifts, tracing a spiral. "Everything leaves a mark," he says. "The question is whether we see it before it's erased." You nod, mouth open, suddenly aware that this room might be the birthplace of 1,000 sciences your textbooks only hint at. Historians still debate whether the library contained blueprints for machines powered by water pressure or heat expansion. Some even claim a description of a self-moving cart was once hidden in a scroll now lost to time. What if they weren't myths? What if they were drafts? One side alcove contains a wall of drawers. You open one at random and find a set of small bronze spheres, each etched with patterns that seem vaguely lunar. A placard says they're memory keepers, meant to store stories coded in vibration. Speak into one, the placard invites, and bury it beneath the roots of a tree. Return in 30 years. You wonder how many were ever dug up. You wonder if any still hum. The man with the feather returns, pointing at the far wall. You see a strange painting there, not of people or gods, but of hands, dozens of hands, each shaped in a gesture, not random, the language. You stare, mesmerized. They believed knowledge could be passed not only by speech or ink, but by movement. He says, gesture is scripture. He waves his own hand in a spiral. You try to mimic it. It feels like drawing a question in the air. Another chamber, dimmer, contains a water clock. It gurgles in rhythm. Someone has painted faces on its side, each one showing a different emotion. Above them, the phrase, "Only those who feel time can measure it." You sit, you watch the drops fall. For once, you don't rush. You begin to suspect the library wasn't just a place of storage. It was a place of philosophy through the body. A thought wasn't complete until it was tasted, sung, danced, chiseled, and then argued about. You imagine scholars debating the flavor of ethics. One saying justice tastes like copper, another insisting it's more like the aftertaste of mint. Further down, a quiet room holds statues of animals, but they're not labeled as species. They're labeled as ideas. A fox stands for the unforeseen. A turtle is labeled time disguised. A lion, false courage. You run your fingers across the lion's mane. It's smooth, polished from centuries of thinkers doing the same. It stares back at you, as if challenging you to disagree with its inscription. You don't. Near the rear wall, you find a scroll too damaged to read entirely. But one phrase remains. When the stars forget their names, the sea will carry them home. You don't know what it means. That doesn't make it meaningless. A narrow arch leads into what was once the medical wing. You enter, expecting charts of bones and herbs. Instead, you find dolls, hundreds of them, wooden, clay, linen, each posed as if mid-sentence. They sit in niches, hang from threads, rest in bowls. Some have names, others bear only phrases. Sorrow's echo, laughter misplaced. This one dreams of teeth. You recoil, then you lean in closer. A sign on the wall reads, "These were used in early therapy." Patients were asked to speak through them. Pain needs a shape. You sit beside a small figure with one eye closed. You whisper a secret to it. You don't know why. It doesn't reply, but something shifts inside you. The room beyond contains medical instruments, both familiar and strange. There are scalpels and herbs. Yes, but also masks designed to change one's breath. A flute labeled, used for the treatment of grief, and a vial marked, for dreams that refuse to sleep. You laugh, you cry, maybe both. In a final cabinet, you find a letter, its edges burned, but its beginning is intact. If this is read, then fire has come, but not all the light is lost. You close the drawer gently. Outside, the wind picks up. You step back into the main hall, and it no longer looks overwhelming. It looks alive. You see children being taught not by recitation, but by riddle. You see old men arguing over the weight of silence. You see a girl reading a book through a mirror, saying it helps her see between the lines. And you think, if this hadn't burned, what else might we have become? Not faster, not stronger, but kinder, stranger, more whole. You sit one last time beneath a window, sun on your face, and as the shadows stretch, you imagine a world where the library still breathes. Maybe that world is asleep inside this one, waiting. You rise again, though part of you wants to remain by that sunlit window, warmed not by heat, but by the afterglow of possibility. Still, you follow the quiet tug that seems to pulse from the stone beneath your feet. A rhythm you no longer question. You walk, and the library folds around you, drawing you into a wing you didn't know existed. It smells faintly of dried roses and sea salt. The air is cooler here, as if history has taken a long breath and is waiting to exhale. This hall is different, less grand, more intimate. The ceilings are lower, the lamps gentler. Here, the shelves are carved into the walls like nests, and each holds not scrolls or tablets but stories. Not fact, but fiction. Myths, fables, dreams recorded in ink and preserved as precious as truth. You reach out and touch a cover wrapped in dyed leather, stitched with gold thread in the shape of a bird with two heads. The title is in a language you don't recognize, but the illustration inside is haunting. A man climbing a staircase that never reaches the top, followed by a cat that wears a crown of fire. Welcome to Alexandria's imagination wing. This is where storytellers came to deposit their impossibilities, where philosophers smuggled metaphors into legend, and where children's tales danced dangerously close to forbidden insight. You flip open a story carved into thin ivory pages. It tells of a city that learned to speak aloud. All at once, its walls humming, its wells echoing, its cobblestones spelling messages underfoot. In the end, the people asked it what it wanted. The city whispered, to be left alone. You close the book and blink. Around you, the silence deepens. Fiction, you begin to understand, was not entertainment here, it was method, a tool, a way to shape the outer edges of thought where logic alone dares not tread. Historians still debate whether certain scrolls in this section inspired later religious texts or whether some sacred writings were themselves shelved among the fables, waiting to be interpreted both ways. One parchment describes a fish who could only remember the future. Another tells of a woman who painted portraits that predicted how people would die. One, memorably, depicts a kingdom ruled by a child who aged backward, forgetting more each year until at last he vanished. You laugh aloud at the absurdity, and then realize you're crying. You wonder what kind of society makes room for this, makes room for play not just as leisure, but as sacred study. Here, imagination is not frivolous, it is divine. You stumble upon a group of students gathered in a circle around an old woman in a blue shawl. She's telling a story, no scroll, no script, just memory and voice. She speaks of a mountain that once challenged the sky to a duel, of a mirror that showed people not their faces, but their intentions. One boy interrupts with a question, and she doesn't hush him. She smiles, and together, they reshape the tale. This is how knowledge evolves. You realize, not with domination, but with dialogue. In the far corner, you find a game board etched into the stone floor. Wooden pieces lie scattered nearby. You kneel and notice the squares aren't all the same size. Some are triangles, others spirals. In the center, a single phrase. Truth moves crookedly. You grin. You suspect this was a classroom once, or maybe a chapel, or both. You rise and find yourself face to face with a mural. It spans the entire wall, stretching upward like a breath held too long, painted in crimson and indigo. It shows a human figure made of gears and stars. One hand touches a book, the other, a flame, above, in flowing script. To imagine is to remember forward. You stare for a long time. Behind you, a door creaks open. You follow the sound and find a chamber unlike any other, not made of stone, but of glass or something like it. Transparent walls pulse with a faint blue glow. In the center, a platform hovers slightly off the ground. On it, a map, but not of land or sea. A map of concepts, emotions, ideas. Time is a loop, ethics is a spiral, mathematics is a song. You step closer. Each idea floats like a star. One labeled, regret, flickers faster when you near it. Another, hope, hums softly. You reach toward one marked curiosity, and suddenly the platform unfolds, blooming into a constellation of linked thoughts, tendrils connecting it to memory, to fear, to invention. You gasp. This isn't a map, it's a mind rendered visible, a way to chart not where you are, but who you are in the world of thinking. Beside it, a scroll pinned under glass reads, "The universe is not only made of atoms, but of attention." You sit, you listen to your heartbeat. You begin to feel that this room could have changed everything. Education, philosophy, therapy, a way to teach not facts alone, but connection, the sacred geography of thought. And then, another whisper. Close your eyes. You do, and the room dims. When you open them again, you're standing outside the glass chamber, facing a hallway of masks. Each mask is carved with an emotion, joy, grief, rage, confusion, awe. Some are symmetrical, others wildly distorted, A placard explains they were used in early drama, worn not to hide the self, but to reveal one layer at a time. You run your hands across one labeled Epiphany. It feels warm. Another labeled Doubt shivers under your touch. Past them, you find a final room. At first, you think it's empty, but then your eyes adjust. The walls are covered in fabric, stitched tapestries from every known culture. Not decorative, descriptive, they tell stories of floods, stars, births, rituals. Some are unfinished, some patched with clumsy hands, but all of them bear names, not of authors, but of communities. Here, the library stored not just knowledge, but memory, cultural memory, the truths people lived by before they wrote them down. You realize this room holds histories that were never official. The voices of women, farmers, dancers, sailors, midwives, their wisdom woven, not scribed, and here, preserved. You press your forehead to one. It smells like cedar and smoke. You close your eyes and see a world where every voice mattered, where every kind of knowing had a seat at the table, where stories were bridges, not walls. You step away, heart full, and find yourself back at a familiar hallway. The steward from your first moment stands there, as if waiting. He doesn't speak, just holds out a fresh wax token. But this one is blank. You take it, and know that now, it's your turn to write. You carry the blank token with reverence now, cupped in both palms like it might bloom or vanish depending on your breath. The weight of it feels unreal and yet somehow heavier than anything else you've held today. It isn't just wax, it's a seed, maybe, or a promise, and as you round the next corner, you realize you're not alone. Not quite. The hallway here is lined with statues, not grand ones, not the towering bronze figures of kings or warriors you've seen in other places. These are quiet, human-sized, made of pale sandstone with softly worn edges. Many don't have names, some are missing hands, a few wear gentle, knowing smiles. One cradles a stylus, another holds a cracked tablet, and one just like you, clutches a wax token. You stare at that one a long while, then you move on, drawn toward the faint hum of voices, not the chaotic murmur of scholars or the energetic shuffle of scroll pages, but something steadier, like ritual. You pass into a room with a domed ceiling painted like a night sky. It shimmers in candlelight, deep blues and golds, constellations that twist the longer you look at them. Beneath that dome, people sit in a circle, not in rows, not facing a stage or an altar, but facing each other. Between them is a bowl. It glows faintly, filled with water or oil or something that catches the light too perfectly to be either. A voice speaks, soft but firm. What do you believe the world needs? Another follows. What is something you know, but can't explain? You realize it's a kind of seminar, not for debate, but for listening, a place where students and elders, strangers and scribes, all offer their truths without interruption. You sit quietly at the edge, just listening. One man tells a story about seeing music as color. A girl explains that her grandmother taught her mathematics through fruit markets. Someone describes a dream where the stars whispered recipes. No one laughs, no one corrects. Only the bowl flickers with light as each voice enters the circle. You are witnessing something extraordinary, not knowledge taught, but knowledge shared, oral traditions interwoven with observation. personal truth stitched alongside empirical fact. Alexandria, it seems, was never afraid of the subjective. It welcomed it. It held it up to the same light as astronomy or logic. The library had made room for the personal, the mystical, the unprovable, and in doing so, it preserved more than truth. It preserved meaning. You watch as an elder steps forward and places a small carved object into the bowl, a token not unlike yours. You glance at your own, wondering when your time will come. Eventually, the session ends, not with applause, but with silence. Everyone sits still a moment longer, letting the final story echo. Then they rise, bow gently to each other, and leave. You stay behind, looking up at the painted constellations. One of them, you now realize, matches the shape of the room below. This space was designed to reflect the sky above and the mind within. You stand and step through a smaller door at the back of the chamber. It leads to a stairwell, a spiral, narrow and dark, the kind that feels older than the stones themselves. You descend slowly, guided only by the rhythmic sound of your feet and the occasional flicker of light through cracks in the wall. At the bottom, you find a chamber that smells of metal and earth. This is the vault, not the library's treasure room, not gold, not relics, but something even rarer. You see machines, devices, not many, but enough to stun you. One is a sort of water clock, but more intricate than any you've seen. Its gears are etched with star charts, and when it ticks, it glows faintly with each movement. Another is a mechanical arm holding a stylus, poised eternally above a wax tablet, endlessly redrawing an arcane equation that shifts slightly each cycle. There's even a rudimentary lens, glass ground so carefully that it magnifies a scroll laid below it with startling clarity. You pause. Could these have led to telescopes, to printing presses, where they lost blueprints for futures never built? A note beside one machine reads, "For every tool, a second invention is needed, the courage to use it." Historians still argue whether these were prototypes or artistic fantasies. But here, in this room, it doesn't seem to matter. What matters is that they were possible. You imagine a timeline where the library hadn't burned, where these designs were studied, refined, shared. You see clock towers rising centuries early, glass lenses opening skies ahead of their time, music recorded in grooves, lights split by prisms, flight dreamed not centuries but generations earlier. You shake your head, it's dizzying, and yet, you feel no sorrow. Not here. The vault isn't a grave. It's a seed bank. You press onward and find one final artifact, a globe. But it's not a globe of earth. It's conceptual. Instead of continents, it shows fields of knowledge, philosophy, alchemy, astronomy, literature, anatomy, mythology, and lines, thousands of them, connect each area, like trade routes or synapses. One, particularly bold, links poetry to medicine. Another jumps from myth to engineering. You run your fingers over it in wonder. What would it be like to grow up learning this way? Where science and story weren't in opposition, but woven like threads in the same tapestry. You leave the vault, returning to light. Back above, you stumble upon a final door. Unlike the others, it isn't carved or gilded, just plain wood. You push it open and step into a garden. Yes, a garden, enclosed in high walls, shaded by fig trees, alive with the hum of bees trees and rustling leaves. It's not manicured, it's wild, purposefully so. Flowers grow alongside vegetables, vines tangle with herbs. In the center, a fountain, its water dyed with sunlight. Shimmering gold, you inhale deeply. This, you realize, was the library's final lesson. Growth, life, the constant unfolding of new shoots, new truths. You sit on a worn stone bench and feel something shift inside you. Not knowledge, exactly, but peace. Nearby, a young woman tends to a plant shaped like a spiral. She notices you, smiles, and says, "That one's called memory. It grows backward." You smile. Of course it does. You take out your wax token. Still blank, you press it gently into the soft earth. Let it plant something. Let it begin again. The air in the garden tastes older than the scrolls. It hums with a quiet alchemy, one that no chemist could ever quite measure. You stay seated for a long while, hand resting lightly on the token now buried in the soil. You're offering to Alexandria. Or maybe it's offering to you. It's hard to tell who owns what anymore. Bees drift lazily past your ears, pausing in the lavender like sleepy punctuation marks. The gardener doesn't speak again, but she doesn't leave either. She prunes gently, purposefully, with a blade so small it feels ceremonial. You begin to suspect that this whole space is ceremonial, but not in the stiff, incense-drenched way temples often are. No, this garden feels like the city's exhale, the breath it takes between ideas, a place for the intellect to be quiet and let the body remember it exists. You rise, slowly, your legs tingle, unsure if they've forgiven you for the stairs, the sprints, the surprises. You leave the garden through an ivy-covered archway that leads into a narrow corridor. This hall has no windows, just torches. You follow their flickering logic down a gently sloping ramp. The temperature drops, the sound changes. There's no echo here, only absorption. You are entering a chamber designed not to amplify noise, but to swallow it whole. At the end of the ramp, a curtain hangs, not fabric, beads, tiny discs of glazed clay strung together into a thick, undulating veil. You part them gently and step inside. The room is round, lined with niches. Inside each niche, a small object, a reed pen, a twisted metal ring, a shard of obsidian, a worn dice carved with unknown numerals. You understand almost none of them, and that, apparently, is the point. A small plaque near the entrance reads, "Here are things we could not explain." Yet, the word "yet" is underlined in gold. You wander, peering into each alcove. One holds a cube that spins perfectly on one corner without ever stopping. Another glows faintly under your breath. One niche is empty. A soft label beneath it says, "Missing since the fire of 42 BCE. If found, please return." A joke, perhaps, or not. You're not sure which is more terrifying. At the room's center is a low pedestal bearing a single word. Why? Not "what is this?" or "who made it?" Just why. It echoes in your chest, louder than anything else. When you step out of the room, you're not the same person. You're heavier, but also lighter. The way a question frees you once you realize you never needed an answer. Just the courage to ask. You continue on, eventually reaching a stairway that ascends sharply. It leads to a gallery where the walls are covered in painted panels, scenes from across the ancient world. But these aren't the tidy, triumphal murals you're used to. These are messy, beautiful, contradictory. One shows a group of people crying and laughing at the same time. Another depicts a city with two suns in the sky. A third is entirely black, save for a single eye painted in the middle. You pass a panel showing a burning tree, and beside it, a young child pouring water from a jar that never empties. These aren't facts, they're metaphors, myths, dreams, and yet every panel is labeled with a source, a scroll, a voice, a memory. The library didn't just catalog knowledge, it preserved imagination, treated it like data, gave it as much room on the shelf as mathematics or medicine. You finally reach the last panel. It shows the library itself, glorious, intact, its doors open wide. Above it, the sky is filled with stars. But every star is a word, tiny, shimmering letters that you recognize as languages from around the world. Some still spoken, some long dead, and among them, yes, your own language, your own alphabet, right there, in the painted heavens. You don't cry, but you feel like you've come close to it. Multiple times today, down another corridor, you find something unexpected, a theater, but not a grand amphitheater with rows of marble seats. This one is intimate, a circle of cushions, a small stage, barely raised. A voice is already speaking, slow and melodic. You join quietly, sit at the edge. It's a storyteller, not reading, remembering, telling tales the way people have always told them, through gesture, through cadence, through the rhythm of inhaling and trusting someone will listen before you exhale. She weaves a story of a sailor who mapped the winds using feathers, and of a philosopher who planted seeds and argued with them until they bloomed. You're not sure what's true. You're not sure it matters. When she finishes, no one claps. They just breathe, deeply, gratefully, the same way people breathe after a long-held note finally resolves into silence. Later, you explore one last room. It's labeled simply, if. Inside are scrolls, but not real ones. These are simulations, hypotheses. One shows what math might have looked like had zero never been invented. Another speculates on Egyptian steam technology taken just one step further. A third plays with the idea of language entirely without nouns. The titles are delightfully bold. If stone could sing, if rivers voted, if fire was alive. This room isn't for what was, it's for what could have been. You stare a long time at one scroll entitled, If the Library Had Never Burned. It's the thickest, unopened. You don't read it. You don't have to. You've lived it. You step out of the room of ifs with the strange sense that you've been told something without words. Something larger than any scroll, louder than any chorus, yet delivered entirely in silence. The hallway beyond is quiet now. The crowds are gone, or perhaps they were never there. Your footsteps feel louder in this silence, echoing off the smooth sandstone, cushioned only by age. A corridor curves left, then right, and eventually opens into a domed chamber. High above, painted constellations stretch across the ceiling, ancient and a little inaccurate, but still majestic. A circular bench surrounds the room. In its center stands a single object, a table. On it, arranged with reverence, lies a scroll no wider than your hand but longer than you are tall. It's bound in a braid of red thread, its title inked in faint gold, to be read only when ready. You're not ready. You sit, A soft chime rings out, no visible source. A door opens silently on the opposite side of the room. An older woman walks in. Her robe is simple, but on her sleeve is embroidered a phoenix. She nods at you as if she's been expecting this moment for years. "You've walked far," she says. Her voice is dry as parchment, but not unkind. You nod. "Do you understand now?" she asks. You're not sure what to say, but your body answers for you. You lean forward. You whisper, "Almost." She smiles. That's all anyone ever gets. She motions for you to follow. Through the door, the floor changes from stone to mosaic, thousands of tiles, each one etched with a name, not of famous people, not kings, or generals, or priests. You spot a baker, a child, someone listed only as the one who tried, a memorial, but also a message. History remembers more than you think, if you know where to look. Eventually, you arrive at the Hall of Echoes. That's not its official name. The plaque just says, "Disputed Truths," but you immediately understand why the locals gave it the nickname. As you step inside, your own footfalls echo, but not back to you. They seem to spiral, bounce off hidden surfaces, return as whispers, words not quite your own, but familiar, as if your thoughts are being spoken back to you, corrected, reframed, questioned. At first, it's disorienting. Then, it's addictive. You begin to speak aloud, just to hear how the hall interprets you. You say, "What if we'd never lost the library?" And it answers, not in a voice, but in a feeling, a swirl of overlapping impressions. Steam engines in Babylon, women leading observatories in Carthage, ink in knot libraries linked to Mediterranean sea charts. It doesn't show you images. It doesn't explain. It evokes a version of history unbroken, but uncertain, advanced, but not cleaner, just more. Scholars still debate whether the library truly contained blueprints for a steam engine, or if those tales were apocryphal embellishments by later inventors desperate to validate their genius. Some believe Hero of Alexandria's early machines were amusement devices, mere toys. Others argue they were the first, glimmering sparks of an industrial revolution that could have dawned a millennium earlier. You find yourself suspended between belief and disbelief, neither place comfortable. Both deliciously alive, you press deeper into the hall. One alcove plays out the lost epics, stories erased in the fires. Voices never copied or quoted. Here, you hear the tale of the blind astronomer who mapped the moons by scent and temperature. There, you catch pieces of a song from a language that split itself in half every winter and recombined in spring. Another section whispers an argument between two historians over whether knowledge wants to be remembered or simply witnessed once and released. And then you hear your own voice again, saying something you haven't said, yet the words float back to you like a message from tomorrow. If we knew everything, would we still need wonder? You pause. The hall quiets. You leave. A final stairway leads upward. You expect to emerge outside, blinking into sunlight, but instead, the stairs open into a room made of mirrors. Tall, thin, silvered glass lines every wall. You see yourself in infinite versions, tired, curious, young, old, eager, afraid, each reflection slightly different. Some blink out of sync, others smile without view. One holds a scroll. You reach toward it, and the scroll vanishes, but you're left holding something, a wax seal. stamped with the phoenix, the same symbol on the woman's robe, the same symbol you've seen again and again on doors, on robes, on the tiny glints within the stars on the ceiling mural. This was never just a library. It was a philosophy, a way of understanding that everything burns, eventually, but that doesn't mean it's lost. The phoenix burns to be born. You descend once more, slower now. You know you're nearing the end. Back in the atrium, you find the same steward who greeted you so long ago. Or maybe not the same. He looks older, or you do. He takes your gaze gently. The library kept you longer than most. He says, you nod. You'll forget parts. He warns, but not the shape of the forgetting. You don't know what that means, but you feel it's true. As you step outside, the light is different, not brighter, just more aware of you. You breathe it in like a scholar would a fresh ink pot. The air tastes like yesterday and tomorrow at once. And now you're walking, away from the library, but carrying it, somehow. It doesn't burn anymore. It remembers. The road from the library stretches before you like a breath held too long. You step into it not as a visitor, but as something transformed, burnt around the edges but still whole. Behind you, the great doors of Alexandria's wonder close without sound. Ahead, the city murmurs. It should feel loud. Horses clatter, merchants shout. The fishmonger still sings off-key, but something's shifted inside you. And now all of it, every voice, every footfall, feels like a layer of parchment you can almost read. Not just hear, not just see, understand. The city waits. You wander not toward your inn or your ship or any specific goal. You just follow the rhythm of thought. And Alexandria gives. You pass a corner where a boy sketches something in the dust with a reed. Spiral shapes, not letters, not art, equations. You pause. He looks up at you, unsure whether to smile or frown. Instead, he says, I can make water fly. You don't laugh, not anymore. You nod and say, keep going. He does. Farther in, an old woman sells wax cakes stamped with constellations. You recognize 3, the 4th you've never seen, but it feels familiar, like a half-remembered dream or the outline of an idea you haven't thought yet. She wraps the cakes in linen dyed with crushed violets. For memory, she explains. You buy 2. Even the shadows in Alexandria have a story now. One dances across a building face shaped like a philosopher in profile. Another crawls up the steps of a temple as if trying to re-enter it. A third, thin and twitching, leads you to a shaded courtyard where scholars argue. Loudly, debate, Alexandria's true national pastime. You sit at the edge of the courtyard, behind a chipped statue of Hermes, and listen. The topic, whether history has a shape or if it's just motion wearing different masks. One scholar, young and anxious, insists history is spiral-shaped. We loop, but we never repeat. She cries, slapping her palm against a scroll. Her opponent, older, amused, counters with, it's more like waves, repetitions with variation. He waves his hand as if conducting. The third, half asleep and entirely uninterested, just says, it's a jar. History is a jar and we're ants inside. You don't know who's right, and neither do they, but that doesn't stop the arguing, or the joy in the arguing. It feels like an orchestra of thought, offbeat, passionate, wildly out of tune, and all the more alive for it. You could stay, join them, but something tugs. A sound, almost, a sensation, a whisper that says, "There's one place left." You follow it, down alleys that shimmer with sunlight bouncing off white stone, past taverns painted with murals of sea monsters who may have just been very confused whales, past a school where children chant the names of planets, some real, some speculative, past a fountain that trickles like a ticking clock, and then a wall. Not a grand one, no gold, no guards, just a square of bricks and a door too small for a chariot, too wide for a closet. You knock, no one answers. You knock again, the door creaks open on its own. Inside is a room, no scrolls, no scholars, just a single object, a mirror. You stare, and the mirror stares back, but not at you. Not exactly. It shows Alexandria, but not this Alexandria, a version of it. But what if, in this Alexandria, the library never burned? And oh, what a difference. You see domes powered by sun mirrors, turning gently to follow the sky. Women in lab robes adjust lenses the size of wagon wheels, peering into distant galaxies through water-magnified tubes. Ships sail with metal wings flapping gently, powered by pulleys and flame. A boy walks with an automaton dog. A girl sings to a tree and the tree hums back. You step closer. The image sharpens. You see classrooms filled with people of every color, age, language, arguing joyfully. You see cities linked by knowledge, not conquest. You see books, yes, but also threads of light carrying words across miles. You see peace, not everywhere, not always, but in longer stretches than history ever gave you. You see medicine born not just of plants, but of patterns, diseases traced like poetry, cures sung like prayers. You see elders revered not for their years alone, but for the questions they still ask. And then, most beautifully, most heartbreakingly, you see a child, holding a scroll, reading it aloud to a crowd. And the scroll is written by someone who would have died forgotten, had the library not remembered them. Your breath catches. You step back. The mirror dims. That world fades. You look down, and your own hands are shaking. Not from fear, from the ache of knowing. The ache of having touched a future that could have been, that might still be. You leave the room. Outside, the air smells of cinnamon and ink. Evening now, the sky dressed in apricot and copper. The wind carries laughter, cooking fires, the creak of cards, the sigh of scholars. You pause, take it in, and then, from somewhere behind you, someone calls your name. You turn, but no one's there. You smile. It was never about being called. It was about being remembered. The library may have burned. The scrolls may be ash. But the questions survived. The dreams lived on. And every time someone asks, "What if?" the fire flickers back to life. You walk back to your inn as the stars blink one by one into place above you. And you whisper, "I will remember." Because now, you can. Night settles over Alexandria not like a blanket, but like a question, a soft one, but persistent. You step through its velvet hush with a kind of reverence, feeling the city change beneath your feet. Lanterns flicker in niches, oil lamps sputter behind shuttered windows, and the voices shift from debate to lullaby, from commerce to conversation, from the search for answers to the murmur of dreams. You find yourself back in the library's shadow, not within it, but just outside. where the marble steps meet the dusty earth. You sit, there's no one around, only the sound of your own breath and the wind through distant palm leaves. A cat slips past, silent and regal, pausing just long enough to give you a look that says, "You're not the strangest thing I've seen today." And she's right, because the mirror's vision still dances behind your eyes. The city that could have been, the world that might have existed. You keep returning to that automaton dog, to the spiral lenses, to the scroll written by a forgotten voice. Read aloud beneath a tree of golden leaves. Would it have worked? Could one library, however vast, however sacred, really have shifted the course of the world? You lean back, palms pressed against the stone step, and think, well, why not? Because the thing about knowledge isn't just that it accumulates. It accelerates, layer upon layer, generation after generation, until breakthroughs burst like stars from the night sky. If even a fraction of those scrolls had survived, even a handful of treatises on engineering or medicine or philosophy, how far ahead might we be? How many wars avoided, diseases cured, injustices recognized before they could take root? Historians still debate how many scrolls were lost when the library burned. Tens of thousands, hundreds, a million, and more importantly, what was in them? The answer is always the same. We'll never know. But you've seen something, or rather, felt it. A hint, a trace, like smelling a pie and knowing without a doubt that there's cinnamon inside. Even if you never taste it, you rise and begin to walk again, not through the marketplace, not toward the port, but toward the edge of the city, where the fields begin. And the homes thin, and the stars peek through gaps in the canopy. You're not sure what you're looking for. A sign, maybe, or a symbol. What you find instead is a man kneeling beside a shallow pool, hands cupped around something small and glowing. You approach cautiously. He hears you but doesn't look up. "Fireflies," he says. "They come early this year." You crouch beside him. The pool is no more than a puddle, really, cradled by a circle of flat stones. The man's robes are simple, cotton, dyed the pale yellow of river sand. His hands are ink-stained. You ask if he's a scribe. He smiles. "I was. Now I collect the light." You're not sure if that's literal or poetic, but it doesn't matter. He gestures to the pool. This is where they land. The old ones, the ones who remember. Fireflies. You ask. No. Words. That stirs something. You sit. He explains, gently, as if to a child or someone half asleep. Which, to be fair, you might be. Some say that when the library burned, the words vanished, that they became smoke, ash, dust. He pauses, but I think some of them fled. You tilt your head. Fled where? Into the minds of the willing, into dreams, into whispers that rise when no one is listening. He dips his fingers into the water. And here, sometimes here, you want to believe him. You do believe him. In this moment, anything less would feel dishonest. He pulls a small tablet from his bag. Clay, sun-baked, not much to look at. But he presses it into your hand. It's blank, you say. Not yet, he replies. But it won't stay that way long. You've carried something back with you. Not knowledge, not exactly. More like potential. The outline of a truth waiting to be filled. You run your fingers over the clay. It's warm. And then, this part you won't explain to anyone else. You hear it. A single word. Not aloud. Not with your ears. But inside. It's not in your language. It may not be in any, but it means something like, begin. The man stands. So do you. Neither of you says goodbye. Because in Alexandria, no conversation ever really ends. It just pauses, waiting for the next question. You walk back toward the city with the tablet pressed against your chest. It's heavier than it looks. Or maybe you are. Heavier with wonder. Heavier with possibility. Heavier with the echo of voices long gone, now somehow living inside you. Along the way, you pass a girl sketching star patterns on the wall of a house. A baker humming a tune you're sure you heard in the library courtyard. A guard carving the Greek letter phi into the wood of his spear. All of them, scribes in their own way, recording, remembering. A young boy runs past you laughing. He holds a scroll like it's a sword. You smile. You reach your end just as the moon reaches its highest point. The door creaks. The hallway yawns. Your bed greets you with the dusty softness of a place that isn't new but still feels like sanctuary. You lie down. The tablet rests on the windowsill, soaking in starlight. And you let go, not of the thoughts, not of the questions, but of the weight. You let the city sing you to sleep, not with lullabies, but with ideas, with the sound of papyrus fluttering, with the scent of old ink, with the shape of possibility curling gently around your heart. The library may have burned, but tonight it remembered you, and you remembered it. And in that remembering, something was rebuilt, not in marble, not in scrolls, but in you. You wake before dawn, not because of noise, but because of quiet, that rare, crystalline kind of quiet that feels like a held breath. The city hasn't stirred yet. Even the wind seems to tiptoe across the roofs. You lie still for a moment, listening to nothing. Then you remember the tablet. You sit up, reach for the windowsill. It's changed, slightly, imperceptibly, but undeniably. Where once the clay was smooth, it now bears the faintest outline of something, like frost forming into patterns on a window. Not letters exactly, not symbols you recognize, but intention, shape, a pulse beneath the surface. You carry it with you down to the street, past sleeping donkeys and empty stalls, past a man sweeping stone steps with a bundle of reeds, and a dog curled like a comma against a wall. No one stops you. The city does not yet demand your attention. You walk not to the library this time, but around it, behind it, into the places where footpaths are soft and olive trees lean like old philosophers. Because this morning, you're not looking for knowledge. You're looking for what was left behind. There's a small grove you hadn't noticed before, possibly because it wasn't there. You step into its hush, and everything changes. The air thickens with memory. The light comes not from the sky, but from somewhere within the leaves. The ground is scattered with scraps, parchment, broken styluses, torn fragments of maps. You kneel beside one, a corner of papyrus, browned with age, marked only with a spiral drawn in a single brush stroke of cobalt ink. The kind of color you only see in beetle shells and twilight dreams. You don't know what it means, but you keep it. There's something about spirals. They never truly end. You move deeper into the grove. There's a stone table at the center. Around it, 5 chairs. No two the same. One of marble, one of woven reeds, one of ironwood, one of stacked scrolls hardened into a throne, one of air. You swear it hovers. You sit on none. Instead, You place your clay tablet in the center of the table. You wait, and then they come. Not with fanfare, not even footsteps, but with presence. First, the woman in green, her robe covered in tiny stitched stars, her hair braided with thistle stems. She carries no scroll, only a bell made of glass. She nods to you and takes the seat of woven reeds. Then, the man with ink-stained fingers, face half-shadowed, half-sunlit. He walks like someone who's forgotten what pain feels like. His chair is the scroll throne. Next, a child, barefoot and golden-eyed, dragging behind her a leather sack that clinks like it holds bones or coins, or both. She climbs into the marble seat and swings her legs. Fourth, an old man with no eyes. His sockets shine like polished stone. He wears a robe of smoke. When he sits on the air, the breeze stills. Finally, a mirror. No person, just a mirror, oval, framed in tarnished silver. It reflects nothing but sky. They say nothing, but they look at you, and you understand. They are not ghosts. They are not librarians. They are not gods. They are the memory of knowledge itself. They are what lingers when learning is lulled. The woman in green reaches out, touches the tablet. It flares, not with fire, but with story. Images rise, a map, one not of lands, but of ideas, a path connecting questions to curiosity, equations to ethics, stories to stars. The child giggles. The old man smiles with no mouth. The man with ink fingers leans in. Do you see it now? You nod. You do. The library was never just a building. It was a door, and though the original may have burned, the door was never truly shut. It exists in pieces, in questions asked at midnight, in books dog-eared and tea-stained, in arguments over dinner, in poems forgotten on napkins. It exists every time someone dares to wonder, why, or better yet, what if? The child slides the map toward you. You touch it and feel a warmth in your chest. Not heat, not magic, but anticipation, like standing at the edge of a very high place, knowing you're about to leap, not to fall, but to soar. The mirror flickers. You catch a glimpse of your own face, not as it is, but as it could be. Eyes brighter, posture straighter, mind not fuller, but freer. You look up and they're gone. Only the grove remains, and your clay tablet, now etched with symbols that you cannot read but somehow understand. You return to the city. The sun rises, the market awakens, but everything is different, because you carry a new kind of burden now, not of regret, but of responsibility. You know what could have been, and you know it's not too late. Knowledge doesn't burn, it hides, it waits, and it listens, always, as you pass a boy learning to tie a sailor's knot, a woman teaching her daughter to grind grain, a storyteller whispering fables to a yawning crowd. You see it. The fragments, the sparks, the library, in exile. You pause at a wall covered in graffiti. Among the scratches and slogans, someone has drawn a spiral in cobalt ink. You smile, and you walk on, toward whatever comes next. The wind is warmer now. Alexandria exhales as if the entire city had been holding its breath all night. Sunlight creeps over the stone, gilding edges of roofs, illuminating merchant stalls not yet opened. You walk slowly, as though your feet are tracing the outline of an idea that hasn't fully formed. You're not heading toward the library anymore. In fact, You're no longer sure it's even there. At least, not the way it once was. The clay tablet in your hand feels heavier, not physically, but with weight that can't be measured. Symbolic, ritualistic, personal. It hums faintly, or maybe that's just your pulse, each beat syncing with something larger, something older. You turn a corner and stop. There's a crowd gathered, though they're not shouting, not pushing, they're simply listening. In the center, a woman with hair coiled like ivy around her head is telling a story. Not reading, not reciting, telling, from memory, from feeling. Her hands shape the tale like play on an unseen wheel. You recognize the story. It's from one of the scrolls. The one that spoke of rivers that warred, of floods that whispered insults and whirlpools that plotted revenge. It was nonsense and beauty all at once, and here she is, spinning that nonsense into gold. Children giggle, elders nod slowly, as if remembering something important. A stray dog sneezes, causing a ripple of laughter, and in that moment, you understand. This is what survived. Not buildings, not shelves, not indexes, but stories. Glorious, absurd, persistent stories. Even when written words are ash, the ones etched in memory remain. You approach, kneel at the edge of the group. The woman catches your eye and winks. The kind of wink that says, "Yes, I know who you are. I know what you've seen." You sit, tablet on your lap, and listen. The story shifts. Now it's about the stars. But not just their positions or names. It's about how they argued. How Orion once tried to swap places with the moon. How Sirius went missing for 3 nights and came back with secrets. The crowd is mesmerized. You are, too. You think of the scholars in the library, those long gone. Those imagined, you picture them frowning at this tale, marking it as heresy or metaphor or perhaps both. But you'd bet anything that at least one would smile, one would listen, one would understand that truth doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it dances in riddles. The sun climbs, the story ends. The crowd disperses like petals blown gently apart. You remain seated. You look down at the tablet. The symbols are clearer now. One spirals out into a constellation pattern. Another flares like a sunburst. Still others resemble things you've never seen but feel oddly familiar. You trace them with your finger, not to decode, but to honor. A shadow falls over you. You glance up. It's the steward, the one from the library. But he looks different, less bored, more curious. His robe is embroidered now, not with dust and wear, but with threads of silver. He doesn't speak, he just sits beside you. You saw it, didn't you? He finally asks. You nod. He leans back, looks up at the sky. People always think the fire ended it, that the flames took everything. He turns to you, eyes gentle, but Alexandria was never just stone and scroll. It was possibility. You ask him if that possibility still exists. He chuckles. You're holding it. You glance at the tablet. He doesn't mean the clay. He means you. What if we hadn't lost it? You ask aloud. What if the library had survived? He considers the question as if tasting it. Then maybe, just maybe, we would have lost something else. You frown. Like what? He shrugs. The hunger, the wonder. Sometimes, when everything is known, curiosity dies. The ashes weren't just loss. They were invitation, a reminder to rebuild. You let that sink in. Would you trade the mystery for certainty? Would you want a world where all the answers lived in one place? Would you still go looking? The steward stands, brushes imaginary dust from his robes. The library, he says, wasn't destroyed, it was scattered. He walks away. You don't follow. You look at your hands instead. They tremble, not from fear, but from readiness. You rise, not hurriedly, but with intent. The market is waking now. Spices fill the air. Bread bakes in clay ovens. Children chase pigeons, and traders polish brass under the sun. You walk toward the docks. A ship is being loaded, papyrus bales, amphory, and what looks like a satchel of scrolls. You ask the captain if there's room for one more passenger. He looks you up and down. You carry anything dangerous. You show him the tablet. He smiles. Only the most dangerous thing there is. You climb aboard. The ship creaks, moans slightly as if waking from a dream. Sails unfurl. The wind catches. Alexandria recedes. But it doesn't vanish. It lingers on the tablet, in your ears, in the spaces between facts and dreams. You sail not toward an answer, but toward another question. What else might still be out there? What else might be waiting? You sit at the prow, the tablet beside you, and you close your eyes. You dream not of the past, but of futures that could have been and might still be. And as the waves rise and fall beneath you like pages turning, you smile because you know if the library hadn't burned, maybe we'd have everything, but maybe we'd understand nothing. And yet now, with less than everything, we understand more than ever. That the search is the story, and you're the storyteller now. And now, as the ship sails gently into the unknown, the story of Alexandria settles softly into your memory like dust on old parchment. You've wandered through stone corridors that hum with lost whispers, traced invisible words across clay, listened to legends reborn on morning air, and faced the bittersweet truth that the past is both ash and seed. What was lost at Alexandria was never just scrolls or buildings. It was a chapter in a much larger book. But that book, it turns out, is still being written in every question you ask, every story you tell, every connection you make across time and thought. You become part of what the library was always meant to be, a living archive. Not static, but moving. Not sealed, but shared, a place where no idea is too strange, no tale too wild, and no dream too far. Tonight, as your breath slows and your body softens into sleep, let that be your comfort. You are not far from Alexandria. You carry its spirit with you, in the books stacked beside your bed, in the curiosity that won't let your mind rest, in the soft, simple act of wondering, what if? Thank you for wandering with me tonight. If you like this space and want to see me again on future nights, please like and follow. We have many more nights to tell stories together. Feel free to leave a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening. I'd love to know where our shared curiosity reaches. Now take a deep breath. Relax your body, and start getting some good sleep. End of script. Thank you for listening to the entire video. Greater than.